So I wanted to share with you something from Caleb Maupin, who is a journalist and author who has his own channel, and I'll leave some information to that channel so you can join if you wish. And in this live stream Caleb Maupin did recently, he was talking about Ayn Rand, who a lot of US GOP politicians seem to admire, and Ayn Rand is very problematic. She's, well, anyway, Caleb Maupin will explain her issues. She basically thinks compassion is weak, having empathy is a weakness, things that one might even find that patriarchy promotes in, that patriarchal society even promotes with men, but that compassion and empathy is a sort of a weakness and that kind of thing. She shares similar sorts of thinking that one would find with the Nazis, where the first group of people that the Nazis killed were disabled people, and they called them useless eaters. Useless eaters, that's what they called disabled people. The Nazis called disabled people because they basically were just sort of sucking up resources and no value. They thought they were no value to anybody. That's physically and mentally disabled people. Now, where have we heard this before, that that kind of attitude? When Caleb Maupin was talking about Ayn Rand, he was talking about libertarianism and how psychologically it shares some, it has some fascistic overtones with it, and he explains why that is. So I'm not going to explain that here, but I'll show you. It's about 14 minutes long, and I think it's very interesting. But what I found interesting in this chat by Caleb Maupin about Ayn Rand is that actually, even though there might be politicians in the GOP that tend to very overtly share Ayn Rand's philosophy, like Paul Ryan, I think, is a great admirer of Ayn Rand. So there are a lot of politicians in the GOP that share that, and they're quite open about it in a way. You can see that in the Democratic Party too. They may not be overt about it, but you can see by the way they withhold, by the way they sort of purposely obstruct Medicare for all and that kind of thing, that in many ways they also believe in the kind of attitudes that Ayn Rand has. I mean, Obama used to be called the deporter-in-chief. He deported 2 million migrants plus, and when he was in office, and he also separated families, and the ICE existed, and ICE is just a racist organization that should be abolished. Homeless people are vilified, and people are arrested and charged with felonies and whatever for assisting migrants or trying to help homeless people. These are things that are happening in the United States under both parties, under both major parties, under the duopoly. So it's not even a libertarian thing of sharing the psychological values of Ayn Rand or whatever. It's actually widespread. This is what I feel when I listen to Caleb Maupin talking about libertarianism and Ayn Rand. I thought, wow, this is actually you could use this to describe pretty much both parties and a lot of the people that are a lot of the politicians in those two major parties, and how they actually, either one is less crass than the other, but they have a similar kind of a worldview, a similar sort of way of conducting their policies that do not help people that are disenfranchised, do not help people that are vulnerable. And so it's actually sort of a much greater problem than just, it's a much, Rooney's come to visit me again. There's Rooney. It's a much greater problem than just, say, libertarians or Rand Paul, Paul Ryan, and people like that. And I have to say that experience, my sort of thoughts about libertarianism is, I feel, is similar to Caleb Maupin's, that it's basically a sort of a, if you're poor, too bad, just look after yourself. It's every person for themselves. Well, that's fine if you've got a privileged background, but if you don't, too bad. They might be good on imperialism, as in being anti-imperialist. For example, Ron Paul, he seems to be anti-imperialist. But, you know, when it comes to sort of society and helping people that are disenfranchised, the poor or whatever, I think it's really just, you know, everybody take care of themselves. Well, that really works for privileged people. So I find it a very disturbing sort of a political position, and I find it very bizarre that people think that they're somehow progressive if they're subscribing to libertarianism. That's just me. Anyway, but, you know, I just find that Ayn Rand's philosophy of the poor are weak, the rich deserve to be rich, the, you know, compassion is weakness, empathy is weakness, and all that sort of thing, is sort of something that is actually is pervasive in the both major parties in the United States, and that's kind of scary, really. But you can see it. It doesn't take a lot of it. It's not rocket science to see how pervasive it is. And I would say that in my own country, in Australia, Scott Morrison, the coalition government we have, the right-wing government, is very much like that as well. It's very much sort of, it doesn't care really about poor people, doesn't care about the unemployed, doesn't care about disabled people, wants to take everything away from anybody, any sort of social support programs, wants to take it all away. So Ayn Rand is, you know, would be somebody he probably wouldn't see himself. He actually goes along to these sort of evangelical Christian things and probably thinks of himself as some sort of Christian, but certainly not someone that Jesus would approve of, I'm sure. But, you know, that's sort of the, but he subscribes to all of that. And I think that's a very common thing today in many governments, and even people on the who are supposed to be, like, for example, the Labor government here in Australia, the fact that they have abandoned asylum seekers to these detention centres where they're harming themselves because they never know when they're going to be released from there, and they're fleeing our Western imperialist wars, and they've been abandoned in these detention centres that are hideous indefinitely. It's a psychological torture, and they're being abused by the guards there, and their children are psychologically traumatized and all of that. Well, that's treating vulnerable people who are actually fleeing our imperialist wars, treating them like they're nothing. And the federal Labor government also treats unemployed people, even though there's institutionalized unemployment. And with a sovereign economy, we would be able to have a federal job guarantee, but they're not interested in that. They're interested in pleasing corporations and having people so desperate to work, so desperate for money, they'll work for nothing. That's pleasing the corporations. And the federal Labor Party here refuses to say what they would raise New Start. That's the unemployment benefits. It's below the ability to live in any way. It's so pathetic, the amount they're giving unemployed people every week, that it would be impossible for them to live. And it's well known that it's impossible for them to live on this. And yet the Labor Party refuses to say, well, we'll raise it to the level of the pension. I mean, the pensioners find it hard to live on the pension, and that's another $200 more a week than what these unemployed people are getting. So it's just cruelty. The whole thing is cruelty and abusive. So, you know, this sort of Ayn Rand idea actually is much more widespread in the world today, much more widespread. And this sort of mean-spiritedness and anti-human sort of behavior from governments and this sort of appealing to some sort of mean, cruel sort of a common denominator. I don't even know who they're appealing to, but I think it's to really corporations, so that corporations can feel like they can just anybody will, you know, be happy with any pitiful amount of money to work. So, you know, that's neoliberalism, and that is, and so anyway, all I'm really saying is when I was listening to this description, and I think please listen to it when Caleb Maupin proceeds to talk about libertarianism and Ayn Rand and all of that, and the Nazis and the whole useless eaters thing and all of that. Just think about really how, the politicians today, how the way we are governed, there's a sort of a politics of disposability where a lot of us are disposable now. It's really not important whether we get social support. The governments don't see it as important at all. They're not serving the public purpose at all. They're serving corporations and the military-industrial complex. And so, we are pretty much all disposable at this point, and that's where you can clearly see Ayn Rand sort of thinking. You can see Ayn Rand there sort of in a lot of how governments are treating people. So that's a sort of a frightening thought, but it just was very clear to me when I heard that description. That's not just a libertarianism sort of problem. That is something that already exists now on in major parties worldwide. Neoliberalism and neoconservatism and all of that, all sort of anti-people sorts of policies. And as far as the story that he tells at the end about the wolf and the rabbit, think about when you hear that story, just think about the idea that, in actual fact, think about how when we're not vegan, how we're actually we become like a wolf in a way. We're exploiting the vulnerable, and when we're children, we're told these sweet little nursery rhymes about these sweet little animals on these farms, as if farms are just where animals live a happy life and just prance around and everybody's happy together and all of this, and nothing bad happens. When in fact, while mum and dad are reading these stories to us, they're serving us up all these animal products, where animals on those supposed happy farms, which they never are, but happy farms, are on our plates. They've been tortured and murdered, and their children have been taken away and all of that. They're actually vulnerable, sentient beings. And so when you hear that story about the wolf and the rabbit and how the children were plugging for the rabbit, just think about what we actually do in real life, and how we actually do the opposite to what we think we do. We think we're kind to animals, we think we're animal lovers and all this sort of thing, and yet really that's just something we tell ourselves, because in actuality everything that we do to them and our eating, wearing and using of them says the opposite. Anyway, that's just something. In fact there has been we have been likened by an author once about if animals could actually sort of talk and stuff, they would actually see us as sort of monsters in a way for what we are doing to them. That 1 trillion plus land and aquatic animals every year who are tortured and killed for trivial reasons and mostly palate pleasure, and how we treat them. We gas them, we cut off their genitalia without anesthetic, we take their children from them, we break up families, we kill them before their time, we throw male chicks alive into grinders, we kill young male calves in the dairy industry, when they're a few days old. I mean, the list goes on. We drown animals, we trap them, and they chew off their legs to get away. I mean, if animals could talk, they'd probably consider us monsters, or sort of like a Satan in a way. So anyway, that's just think of that when you hear that story about the wolf and the rabbit, because that's, as a vegan, that's something that came to my mind. Anyway, please stay tuned to listen to Caleb Maupin. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this little excerpt. I think it's very good, and please check out his channel. I don't agree with everything that Caleb Maupin says on his channel, but he has a lot of knowledge, and he talks about socialism, and it's actually a very interesting channel. I'm sure he doesn't agree with everything I say either. That's just how it goes, isn't it? Everybody has different opinions about certain things. Anyway, so thanks so much for watching. Please stay tuned. My name's Trish Roberts. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Click the notifications bell, otherwise you won't receive content. Thanks for watching. Stay around for Caleb Maupin.
The other thing is, these libertarians, they love to run the line. They always say, well, Hitler was a socialist, right? Because it's the National Socialist German Workers' Party, right? You've heard that before, right? Oh, Hitler was a socialist. He believed in big government. Oh, the German government spent money on stuff, so Hitler must have been a Marxist or a communist. They run this line. But what's interesting is during the aftermath of the Second World War, even among conservatives, there was a knowledge that a lot of libertarian rhetoric had a fascistic overtone. the prominent voice of libertarianism in the United States during the 1950s was Ayn Rand. Do folks know who Ayn Rand is? You should know who Ayn Rand is, because it's kind of an interesting story. So she was a young woman in the Soviet Union. Her father was a chemist in the Soviet Union in Russia. During the Russian Civil War, it was a state of war. Millions of people were dying. They seized his property. They forced her to house people in her home. She hated it. She hated communism. She got a free education from the Soviet government in cinematography, engaged in some visa fraud, and was able to leave the Soviet Union for the United States after getting a free education in the Soviet Union. Moved to Chicago, eventually became a Hollywood screenwriter, or worked in a screenwriting office. During the McCarthy period, she narked on her coworkers who were communists and testified against them and became kind of a celebrity. And as a result, her novels, like The Fountainhead, which has a rape scene in it, in which she portrays rape as a heroic act. The Howard Rourke character breaks into a woman's home and violently rapes her. She portrays it as this heroic act, somehow a good thing. You got Atlas Shrugged, which is a novel about the rich people of the world going on strike against the ungrateful poor people who don't recognize their greatness. She wrote a collection of essays explaining her moral philosophy called The Virtue of Selfishness. She wrote there's a collection of her essays called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. She believed basically that altruism and compassion are the greatest evils that exist, and that greed and selfishness is the motor of the world, and that compassion rewards the weak. All her life, she had this weird admiration for murderers, and axe murderers and rapists. When she first came to the United States, for example, she was living in Chicago, and there was a man named William Hickman who strangled and killed his wife, and was told that if he would apologize for strangling and killing his wife, he would not get the death penalty. And he refused, saying that his wife, had cheated on him or whatever and deserved to be strangled, so he was given the death penalty. And Ayn Rand loved this guy and had pictures of him in her bedroom and just fawned over this man who was a wife strangler. People wonder about what motivated Ayn Rand to be so bizarre, why she admired cruelty so much, why she worshipped those with wealth and hated those in poverty. People wonder if she was abused by her father. People wonder if she saw her father's humiliation at the hands of the Bolsheviks and thought he was weak and didn't stand up to the communists enough. People try to psychoanalyze her herself. People wonder if maybe she was abused by her father. It was PTSD, where she's sympathizing with rapists and murderers because she was, molested or abused or something like that. We don't know why Ayn Rand thought the way she did. Maybe it was a chemical imbalance. Maybe she was a natural-born psychopath. We don't know why. We do know the first political cause Ayn Rand ever donated to was Israel and Zionism. She was a big, big supporter of Israel and Zionism. So much so that she advocated at one point the United States invading all the Arab countries during the OPEC boycott and seizing their oil. She said they have no right to their oil if they do nothing with it. Unbelievable. She said that the genocide against Native Americans was a good thing when she was speaking at the Ford Hall Forum, because, they do nothing with the land. We came here. It's that kind of mindset. Ayn Rand's a very sick person. Not a good person. Any society in history, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Confucian, whatever, they're going to look at somebody like Ayn Rand and say, this is a sick woman, right? And generally we think helping people is good. We think hurting people is wrong. That's just generally how people think. That's just kind of the basic essence of humanity. We don't admire cruelty. We don't scoff and think compassion is weakness and evil. Natural, normal human behavior is not the way Ayn Rand thought. However, Ayn Rand, because she loved capitalism and she hated the communists, because of that, Ayn Rand got this really, really special place in American political thought and thinking. So much so that Paul Ryan, top Republican in Congress, considers Ayn Rand to be his personal hero. And many people believe that Rand Paul, the son of Ron Paul, libertarian Ron Paul, is named after Ayn Rand. Now, that's not confirmed, and I think that would cause a problem for Ron Paul if that's confirmed, because Ron Paul is a Christian and a conservative, and Ayn Rand was an atheist, so much so that she thought religion was bad because it caused people to have compassion. I believe she referred to what she called the guilt-peddling Jesus industry. Religion is bad because it encourages people to feed the poor and care for other people. Can't have that. This is Ayn Rand, right? Alan Greenspan the head of the Federal Reserve from 1987 up until 2007. Right? The most powerful, arguably one of the most powerful men in the USA that's not been elected, right? I mean, he's overseeing the Federal Reserve Bank and lending policies, big believer in deregulation. He was Ayn Rand's friend. I mean, they were very close. He was her protege, basically. When Alan Greenspan got his first government job, Ayn Rand went to the White House with him. That's how close they were. They used to go to jazz clubs up into the time when Ayn Rand died in the mid-'80s. They would go to jazz clubs together, right? So Alan Greenspan, the guy who's directing economic policy, is the protege of a woman who glorifies rape in her novels and thinks that genocide against the Native Americans was great and advocates invading all the Arab countries. And yeah, that's who was directing our economy, right? You could think this is just some obscure novelist, right? This is just some obscure novelist with a degree in cinematography and she's right-wing. No. Highly influential woman, Ayn Rand. So let me get back to the point I was making. I was making a point earlier about fascism. So Ayn Rand, right? And of course, Ayn Rand maintains, she's not a fascist. She is a capitalist. And, fascism, National Socialism, it's collectivist, right? No. She believes in individualism, no collectivism. Well, folks, if you read, there's a review of Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged. And it was written in National Review magazine, very conservative magazine, by Whittaker Chambers, who was a very, very right-wing person in the 1950s, star witness of the House Un-American Activities Committee, right-wing, conservative, anti-communist voice. He read Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged. And he said, I kid you not, that in Atlas Shrugged, behind every line, there was a voice echoing the phrase, "To the gas chamber go." He could tell it was fascist. It gave him a fascist sense. And these libertarians look at that, Ayn Rand can't be a fascist. No. Ayn Rand can't be a fascist because fascism is big government and libertarians want no government. So libertarians can't have anything to do with fascism. Well, you're wrong. You're wrong. Folks, who were the first people that the Nazis exterminated or liquidated? Who was it? Who were the first people the Nazis exterminated? The disabled community. And what did they call the disabled community that they liquidated? What did they call them? Useless eaters. You can look that up. The phrase that they used to describe the disabled community, people that were, had trouble breathing, couldn't work, mentally disabled, physically disabled. As they were gassing those people, they said the reason they did it is because they were useless eaters. And that was the term that they used. They actually had a poster, I kid you not, of a disabled man, and it said, "This man costs the German people so much money per year." Right? This idea that certain people in the community of humans are worthless and deserve to be exterminated. One of the most interesting anecdotes I ever heard about Nazi Germany, and again, you never know about this kind of thing. So I'm just telling you, I've heard this anecdote. I've seen it in a lot of World War II era literature, but, you never know about this kind of thing. But one of the most interesting anecdotes I heard was that in Nazi Germany, when school children were being educated by the Nazi regime, that they would read them a children's story about a rabbit being eaten by a wolf. And they would read them this story about, the rabbit is very scared of being eaten. It's running, it's trying to flee. The wolf is chasing it here and chasing it there, till finally the wolf eats the rabbit. They would then put the book down and ask the children who they felt sorry for. And ask them, who do you feel sorry for in this story? And of course, the children, being human, not being robots, said, I feel sorry for the poor rabbit that's fleeing for its life, being eaten by a wolf. Poor thing, just wants to live, and that wolf is chasing after it. And the Nazi teacher, pushing the Nazi party line, would say, wrong. You should feel sorry for the wolf. Because the wolf is the natural superior of the rabbit. And the rabbit, by fleeing for its life, by making it hard for the wolf to capture his prey, is depriving the wolf of his natural place in the world. Right? The wolf is being oppressed by this rabbit that runs from him, makes it hard for him to get what he is entitled to, his prey. The rabbit is inferior. The wolf is superior. There's a natural hierarchy in the world, and the strong must prey upon the weak. And when the weak resist, this must be suppressed. That was the Nazi Party line. That was the fascist outlook. And that is a libertarian viewpoint. That flows through every libertarian novel I've ever read. Compassion is weakness, right? We can't have we can't have social programs to aid the poor. People that are poor are just lazy. People that are rich are just brilliant. They're the motor of the world. They got there by working hard. I mean, any attempt to correct social injustice is just a communist plot to deprive great men. All the libertarian literature is just like that. It's the same mindset. Psychologically, it's the same. Politically, sure, it's different, right? Fascists were all for government intervention. They wanted the government to come in there and exterminate the disabled people. They wanted the government to come in there and build a huge military. They wanted the government to enforce this natural order. Libertarians tend to believe, well, if the government just stays out of everything, we can have a natural order. But it's still the same belief. That some people deserve to be oppressed, some people deserve to be poor, and those who are wealthy, well, they're just naturally superior and deserve to be that way. And then any attempt to correct social hierarchy, any attempt to correct injustice, any attempt to make the world a better place, any joint effort to raise people up and create and build living standards and make a better world, any attempt at that is playing God. It's the Tower of Babel. That is the fascist mindset. And the libertarian mindset and the fascist mindset is the same. That's what Whittaker Chambers, not a fan of Whittaker Chambers, but that's what he saw. When he said that underneath Ayn Rand's writings, he heard a voice saying, "To the gas chamber go." He understood the mindset, right? It is a certain way of thinking that defines the extreme right. They have no empathy, they have no compassion, and they hate those who do. But that's what you need to understand, is that there is an odd, and Nazis, who were Nazis raving against constantly? Communists, right? Is the communists are coming, communists, it's the red menace, communism. And who do libertarians rave against all the day long? Communists. The communists are coming. Oh my God, it's communism. Oh my God, they're going to raise, the price on gasoline by 2 cents because of a tax. That's communism. The like obsessive fear of communism. Seeing communists everywhere. Everyone you don't like is a communist. That is fascist, and that's also libertarian. There is a lot more common ground, psychologically speaking, between fascists and libertarians than they would like to believe, right? I mean, that's just a fact, folks. We shouldn't deny that. There you go.